Have you ever wondered how one of the most legendary films in history almost fell apart before it even got started? Or how a single golden briefcase sparked decades of arguments, theories, and late-night debates? Today, we're peeling back the curtain on Pulp Fiction, and trust me, the truth behind this cult classic is stranger, riskier, and way more fascinating than you've ever been told. The shocking victory that divided Cannes. In the spring of 1994, the cinematic world was turned upside down. Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, a movie filled with hitmen debating cheeseburgers and philosophical passages about miracles, somehow took home the highest honor at the Cannes Film Festival, the Palme d'Or. The crowd's reaction? Absolute chaos. Half the audience stood in thunderous applause, while the other half booed loudly, offended that such a violent, profanity-laced film dared to claim an award usually reserved for elegant art house cinema. Overnight, Tarantino went from video store clerk turned indie director to an international star. But here's the twist. Hollywood insiders weren't thrilled. Some saw him as a reckless disruptor, someone breaking rules that weren't meant to be broken. Yet that chaos, both on screen and off, would define Pulp Fiction's legacy. And speaking of chaos, one of Tarantino's strangest personal quirks made its way front and center. The director's strange obsession. If you've ever noticed something unusual about Tarantino's movies, you're not alone. His well-known fascination with feet was practically on full display in Pulp Fiction. Uma Thurman's Mia Wallace walking barefoot across Jack Rabbit Slims, then later reclining, with the camera lingering on her toes. Fabienne, Butch's girlfriend, introduced in a quiet hotel room with the camera locked on her feet. And of course, Jules and Vincent debating the intimacy of a foot massage, as if it were life and death. Tarantino never denied it. In interviews, he openly admitted it. He has a thing for feet, and he simply doesn't care if anyone knows. That strange personal detail has now become one of his cinematic trademarks. But the quirks didn't stop with what we saw on screen. Even some of the film's most unforgettable moments were happy accidents. Improvised chaos and happy accidents. Let's talk about Marvin. You know the scene. Jules and Vincent, driving away after surviving a shootout, casually chatting about fate with poor Marvin in the back seat. Out of nowhere, Vincent turns around, asks a question, and boom, Marvin's head is gone. The moment is shocking, but also so absurdly funny that it feels real. And that's because much of it was improvised. The script only loosely outlined what would happen. Vincent's gun goes off, the car becomes a disaster, and they have to call the wolf. But when Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta rolled into that scene, they riffed off each other, bouncing lines back and forth until they struck gold. Travolta's panicked denial, Jackson's furious outburst, none of it was word for word in the script. It was raw, unpredictable, and it became one of the most quoted scenes in Tarantino's career. But the casting process? That was just as unpredictable. In fact, some of the actors you now associate with Pulp Fiction nearly weren't there at all. Casting gambles that changed cinema. Harvey Keitel, the calm, commanding Winston the Wolf, filmed his entire role in just 2 days. That alone is impressive. But here's the bigger story. Without Keitel, the movie might not have been made at all. He was one of the film's earliest champions, lending his credibility to help secure funding when studios hesitated. Bruce Willis, at the time a major star, shocked everyone by taking a massive pay cut to play Butch. Why? Because Pulp Fiction was an indie film with a shoestring budget. For Willis, it was a gamble, one that paid off, giving him a career-reviving performance after years of formulaic action flicks. Uma Thurman almost turned the role of Mia Wallace down. She was nervous about the overdose scene and unsure of Tarantino's wild script. It wasn't until Tarantino personally called her, reading the script out loud page by page, that she finally said yes. That risk turned into an Oscar nomination and one of the most iconic roles of her career. And then there's Samuel L. Jackson. Believe it or not, he nearly lost the role of Jules to another actor, Paul Calderon. After hearing the news, Jackson was furious. He flew himself back to Los Angeles for a second audition, stormed into the room full of fire and rage, and absolutely owned the role. Tarantino turned to his producer and said the words that sealed movie history: "We found Jules." These casting decisions shaped the film we know today. But even with the right actors, the production itself was packed with strange choices and behind-the-scenes tricks, secrets from behind the camera. Did you know Tarantino didn't write the script in Hollywood? He actually crafted much of it in Amsterdam, scribbling notes in cafes, chain-smoking cigarettes, and soaking in the cultural quirks of Europe. That's where Vincent's dialogue about the Royale with cheese came from, straight from Tarantino's own experiences comparing America and Europe. Jackrabbit Slim's, the neon-soaked diner where Vincent and Mia shared their famous dance, wasn't a real location. It was built entirely from scratch, designed to feel like a pop culture fever dream, complete with Elvis impersonators and Marilyn Monroe waitresses. And that terrifying overdose scene? When Travolta jams a syringe of adrenaline into Mia's chest, it wasn't filmed the way you think. For safety, the shot was filmed in reverse. Travolta pulled the syringe away from Thurman, and the footage was reversed in editing. The result looked even more violent and surreal. Travolta even had his own strange preparation. To play Vincent as a believable heroin user, he followed advice from a recovering addict: get drunk on wine, slip into a hot bath, and just float. He did exactly that, soaking in tubs until he understood the detached, dreamlike feeling he needed to channel on screen. But all of this pales in comparison to the single greatest mystery in Pulp Fiction: the briefcase that launched 1,000 theories. Every fan remembers the briefcase. Vincent opens it, light spills across his face, and all he can say is one word: beautiful. And yet, we never find out what's inside. Over the years, theories exploded. Some claimed it was Marcellus Wallace's soul, stolen by the devil through the mysterious band-aid on the back of his neck. Others swore it had to be gold or diamonds. A few insisted it was just a plot device, meant to drive the story forward without any real answer. The truth? Tarantino has admitted there was never anything inside. The glowing effect was literally a light bulb rigged into the briefcase. He wanted audiences to project their own imagination onto it, to argue, to wonder, to never quite settle. And 3 decades later, we still don't know. But the mystery of the briefcase isn't the only way Tarantino bent the rules. He broke the very structure of storytelling itself. The story told out of order. Think about Pulp Fiction. Jules and Vincent on their way to retrieve the briefcase. Mia and Vincent's night out. Butch's double cross. The diner robbery with Pumpkin and Honey Bunny. None of it unfolds in chronological order, and that's deliberate. If the movie were told in a straight line, Jules' transformation, his decision to walk away from a life of violence, would happen way too early, robbing the film of its emotional payoff. By shuffling the timeline, Tarantino turned that moment into the final exhale, the moral center of the film. This non-linear approach wasn't just edgy for the sake of it. It reshaped how Hollywood told stories. Films like Memento and 21 Grams followed suit, but none captured the same rhythm and poetry as Pulp Fiction. And all of this innovation came from a film with a shockingly tiny budget, made with pocket change. Here's the part most people can't believe. Pulp Fiction was made for just $8 million. $5 million of that went straight to paying the actors. That left only $3 million for everything else: sets, costumes, film stock, camera crews, and editing. By Hollywood standards, that's pocket change. But Tarantino and his producers stretched every dollar, using creative tricks and tight shooting schedules to make it work. Even Jackrabbit Slim's, despite being a custom-built set, was cobbled together with inexpensive materials. In the end, that $8 million gamble turned into a cultural juggernaut, grossing more than 200 million worldwide. It didn't just put Miramax on the map, it proved that scrappy, rebellious filmmaking could rewrite the rules of modern cinema. Conclusion: the real magic. So what's the real magic of Pulp Fiction? Was it the unforgettable dialogue, the non-linear storytelling, the iconic dance, or that glowing briefcase? Maybe it was all of it. Or maybe it was something deeper. The idea that chaos, accidents, and risks can come together to create something timeless. From Uma Thurman almost walking away, to Samuel L. Jackson storming back into an audition, to Bruce Willis gambling on a pay cut, Pulp Fiction is proof that breaking the rules sometimes makes history. And maybe, just maybe, the real treasure wasn't inside the briefcase at all. The real treasure was how this wild, low-budget film from the 1990s still has us talking, debating, and rewatching 3 decades later. Which secret shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more untold stories from the movies you love, stick around, because the ride's only getting started.